It is 7 o'clock on a Sunday night, and you know what that means. It's time to engage with you on matters that affect you, matters that affect your community, matters that affect your family. So let's get to it. It's Topical starts right now. Very good evening to South Africa and those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman and this is It's Topical. Our digital audience will join us a little later on as we strive for balance and fairness. Sometimes, though, we are led down by technology, unstable signal, people struggling to join our platform, but we endeavor to try and aim to get as many views as we can on a particular subject. That's our promise to you, our loyal viewer. Now, to the topic at hand. Cultural or customary initiation. It's a respected practice, right? It marks the transformation into manhood and womanhood. For a young man, it involves circumcision, but sometimes this practice has been subject to abuse, illegal schools. You've seen the report, serious injuries. Already people have died. According to SABC News reporting, 17 people have died from one province alone this winter season. 17. Why? Why are we still suffering the pain of burying young initiates? At a national level, are the monitoring structures that have been established functional? Look, researching this topic, I have a greater appreciation and understanding of this respected practice. Its importance, no doubt. It's important as a South African to understand each other's culture, right? Each other's heritage, better appreciate what makes us unique as a nation, so that we can all contribute to the betterment of society. But I'm also learning. So as always, we'll bring in the people with the answers to the people who need the answers, which leads us to our question of the week. And we're asking you, as the initiate death toll rises in some parts of South Africa, what measures should be taken in order to avoid this, in order to ensure the safest rite of passage at circumcision schools? Let's walk. Let us know at It's Topical SABC. Mabaya bepile. Mababuye bepila. Direct translation. Let them go alive and let them return alive. But what measures should we have in place in order to prevent initiation deaths? How do we protect culture as well as lives? What's your thoughts on this? Let us know at It's Topical SABC. Perspective coming up. Now time for your roundup. Right, South Africans are marking 2 years since the July 2021 unrest, during which KwaZulu-Natal as well as Gauteng businesses suffered shattering losses and over 300 people died. A joint survey by the Department, or the Durban Chamber of Commerce rather, and Industry and the Durban municipality shows total losses to business in the city were put at a staggering 75 billion rand.
What happened during the looting set me back a lot. I had a supermarket and I had employed 15 people, and those people were able to provide for their families, even my own. But since then, I suffered a great deal. As you can see, I'm back selling on the streets. I didn't get any support to revive my store.
Monetary side, I would say between 40 and 60 million was lost. But back to the emotional side, yeah, it's you lose your wind in your sail to come back to the place. It was difficult to actually come back and get it going again.
Even now, you can say it's not 100% to what it used to be like, because humans are creatures of habit. So once the habit is to get on the taxi, go to Maritzburg, they're still doing it, even though the shops are now available to them. So it's going to take time to change their mind back again and let them see that Boa has something to offer again.
Some business people had to go through some counseling sessions, and some of them got to a point where they give up about business. But we managed to drive most of them back. And looking at the damage was extremely high, yes, of course. But now we can see the improvement.
Meanwhile, the stretch of the N3 highway between Van Riemen's Pass and Escort in KwaZulu-Natal has been opened. The road was closed earlier for the recovery and cleanup operations of the wreckage of 6 trucks, which were set alight earlier this morning. Authorities say the delays along the N3 are costing the country billions of rands, and the N3 links, as you know, 2 economic hubs, the Durban Harbour and Johannesburg, and about 7,000 trucks with tons of cargo use this road daily. Police Minister Bekile says police are closing in on suspects believed to be involved in the torching of trucks on the N3 toll route earlier this morning. All right, back to today's main topic. Let's get you context. And as always, let's turn to the magic wall, what we know and what we need to know and why it matters. So to give you some context, in terms of the consent, right? Consent, prohibitions, age and circumcision. What we are learning now, initiation is a voluntary customary practice. No person may be forced or coerced into attending any initiation school or undergoing any initiation practices. No persons, we're told, may attend an initiation school unless all the relevant consent requirements have been complied with and medicals have been issued in respect to such persons. Now, any initiate who is 18 or older is responsible for obtaining the medical certificate and must submit such certificate to the relevant principal and caregiver. Let's talk about initiation season, right? What do we know about this? An initiation school must be registered at least 3 months prior to the commencement of the initiation season. Initiation seasons must be held during the relevant provincial school holidays and may not interfere or overlap with official school terms. Question: what do you do if an initiation school commences before a school holiday or continues beyond school holidays? We will try to get you some answers with regards to this. Now, what rights do initiates have? So, to receive health education, good quality healthcare and counseling, also an improved or approved traditional surgeon and clean hygienic equipment, demand the registration certificate of a prospective initiation school. Also, communicate any problems you may have with your parents, with your caregivers, friends, etc. So if all these are in place, the question now remains, why are people still dying? All right? So what happens when an initiate dies? Well, in the event that an initiate dies while attending an initiation school, the principal of such school must immediately inform the parents or legal or customary guardians of such initiate, also the police, the relevant provincial initiation coordinating committee, and the relevant traditional surgeon, and where applicable, medical practitioners. Where applicable as well, the relevant senior traditional leaders. Now, this becomes important. According to the Commission for Gender Equality in 2021, these are some of the reasons why people die. The Commission quoted from the Exploring Flaws Embedded in the Contemporary Traditional Circumcision Practice in South Africa, a literature review. That's what it's called. The inability to enforce laws or hold perpetrators to botched circumcisions to account. 1. The lack of oversight of the practice. That's another issue. The inability of government to intervene due to fears of interfering with the modern practice of culture. Traditional circumcision, houses that are not doing enough to safeguard initiates and their human rights. Those are some of the reasons for initiation deaths. Context, always important. We will discuss further with the better minds on this program. At this point, I want to take a look at our regular feature, a word on the street feature, where we took to various locations in Johannesburg. And this is what you had to say with regards to this issue.
Those initiation schools that keep on letting this thing to carry on, because it's been years now, they should be closed. and do things legally, so that we avoid children that are running to initiation schools while parents are not aware of those things.
They must maybe allow doctors who actually have been there before and actually practice with them and preserve the culture that they want to sustain for a longer period.
I realize that there's a lot of tradition behind it, but it needs to be controlled, it needs to be done safely.
Today's initiation leaders lack experience, evident in the high death toll. Losing a child in such a tragic way is truly devastating.
Initiation schools, they are very important in order to preserve our culture and tradition, because it's been dying like for past generation and generation.
It's very disturbing to see young people lose their lives. I do recognize the importance of culture and heritage. Perhaps there needs to be a change in a cultural way that we can still have initiation, but it should not entail such brutality.
Right, we appreciate your views on this matter. Let's get straight to it. Let's discuss. Mabaye bapile bapila. Mababuye bapila. It basically means let them go alive, let them return alive. We've got guests to discuss this. We'll also bring in our digital audience a little later on. Let me introduce them. Prince Zolile Burns-Ncamashe, Deputy Minister of Corporate Governance and Traditional Affairs. We also have Professor David Mosoma, Chairperson CRL Rights Commission, as well as Ikosi VW Mahlangu from the National House of Traditional and Khoi-San leaders, also Chairperson National Initiation Oversight Committee and Heritage, as well as Culture Committee. Good to have you gentlemen on the program, important indeed to discuss. Also, we have Inkosi Mwelo Nonkonyana, Chairperson of CONTRALESA Eastern Cape. He'll be joining us via Zoom in a short while. Let's discuss this. And I understand that it is not a practice that is readily discussed in public. But Deputy Minister, to you first. Why are we still, there are mechanisms, measures in place already to prevent deaths. Why are we still seeing it?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that the rite of passage is a cultural and customary practice whose originality would begin with the family. From the family, it would then go to the community, so that when initiates are at the seclusion, it becomes a societal responsibility. In instances where you analyze the cause of death, well, it's very important to understand, is it natural, is it unnatural? In instances where the death is natural, it would be attributed to 1, dehydration, 2, septicemia, 3, let's talk about the 2.
Yeah.
That dehydration will arise out of the initiates being deprived access to water. The question would be, why is that practice done in the exclusion, in the seclusion? Because by its nature, there's no rite of passage that is exercised without the first thing that you are told is that you will have access to water, but the water that you will use will be different from the normal water. So this is a foreign notion to say there must be no water.
Yeah.
2, there is no initiate who would be circumcised today and tomorrow would be diagnosed with septicemia. It simply tells you that there is something that ought to have been done, which has not been done, which ultimately led to the cause of death. So it's important to understand that both of what I'm talking about, the traditional nurse or caregiver has a responsibility to make sure that what I'm talking about is one of the basic provisions that are given to each and every initiate, with parents, especially male parents of the family, taking full responsibility of everything, especially on the first 7 to 10 days of the initiates being in the seclusion. So it's important to have that kind of understanding so that you can be able to know where is this being lost. In a number of from the empirical evidence, in a number of areas where we still encounter this kind of eventualities, fatal eventualities, it's illegal initiation schools in most cases, where young boys are abducted and or kidnapped, kept there by people who I doubt if they have experience. They are just criminals who are vulgarizing this very important cultural practice for nothing else but to pursue their greed for money, because they would stay there and demand money from the parents. So you can actually see from there that we find ourselves in situations where we have to explain things that ordinarily should not be happening. And we really feel very sad, and we want to convey our heartfelt condolences to all the parents who have lost their children.
So it's a societal issue. It mustn't be looked at government and parents on a separate platform. It's a holistic approach, is what I'm getting from you, Deputy Minister. Ikosi, Mahlangu, Deputy Minister talks about where it might be we losing the battle. How can we pull it back? How can we win in terms of what needs to happen now that's not happening to prevent deaths?
Good evening, Blaine. Thanks for having me here.
Welcome.
Blaine, as you said, when you start talking, you said initiation is something that you not talk just anywhere or with whoever. It's cultural. That's the way it should be. It pains to see initiates on the media. The practice does not come sacred or secret anymore. We need to take in cognizance that this is a sacred practice which we need to protect and preserve. So what I'm saying, I would love to see, or the community out there who's concerned like me would like to see no more initiates on media. But your point, when I'm coming to your point, South Africa is diverse in cultures. Being diverse in cultures, we practice one culture, but we practice it differently. So there are many ways. I only know my culture. What is it that I should do in order to have a safe initiation? But in other cultures, I would not have an idea what is it that they are doing, what is it that is wrong that they are doing. I can't talk for them. One is preparation. A well prepared, which is the parents, traditional sergeants, and the senior traditional leaders who are overseers of the practice.
Right.
So it is very much important to go all these rituals before the initiation. Parents must be prepared. In my culture, it takes a year before the preparation, before the actual event.
Right.
So all these months is preparation, preparing them physically, preparing them mentally. So that when we get there, everything runs smoothly.
Right. Do you think there's an understanding, though, from parents in order to better prepare their children for this rite of passage? Is that happening enough?
Actually, it's not happening enough. As I said, our cultures are diverse. In some instances, other tribes relinquished the practice back there. And at this point in time, their children or their grandchildren want to go through that. And they have not gone through that. What preparations are they going to do? So it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
Professor, I remember reading something back in 2019. You were quoted saying, "We believe that culture does not kill. Everyone has a right to life." When you assess what has been happening over the past couple of years, what compliance matters, in your view, are not being comprehensively addressed in order to save lives?
One is that having realized the carnage, the loss of our sons in this very important sacred cultural practice, we convened the initiation in Daba on the 25th and 26th of April. We invited all the stakeholders, and all of us, 3 of us were present. One of the overriding resolution was that there is a need to assert the rule of law. And secondly, the authority of the state. In doing so, in order to ensure the elimination of bogus initiation schools, in order to preserve the sanctity of the life of our sons, and also the sacredness of this cultural practice. Now, what I've just said, that's where lies the problem. When we have a proliferation of the bogus institution, where does the elimination rest? Well, we need communities to be able to be aware and say, this is not the initiation school where your son must go. And we agreed that where there's going to be an initiation school, there must be an advert in the local newspapers, even the local regional radio stations, for people to identify the true and the illegal initiation school. And the attempt is to make sure that our sons are geared towards going to the right school.
Right. But currently, how do parents authenticate the legitimacy of an initiation school?
For now, I think the NEOC, which is the Mahlangu is actually responsible for, they just embarked on an awareness campaign nationally to try to make sure that communities become aware of the distinction between the legal and illegal initiation school. But what is important is the role of all structures.
Right.
And I think the Act, the Cultural Initiation Act has identified those for each and every structure to play their role. Key. And where initiation, deaths has occurred, we must be able to know which structure has dropped the ball in order to make sure that there is accountability.
Right.
Because if we don't do that, we don't understand that initiation as a system, as the DM has already indicated, is a management structure. It can only survive with all the things that have been said when things are done properly.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me bring in Inkosi Nonkonyana, chairperson of CONTRALESA Eastern Cape. Inkosi, good to have you on the program. The good professor was talking about accountability and how do we figure out what structures have dropped the ball when we talk about initiate deaths. What's your take in terms of how do we properly monitor these structures in order to prevent people dying?
Thank you so much. Good evening to you. I salute our DM, Prince Burns-Ncamashe, and our chair of Chapter 12 institution, Professor, as well as my colleague Ikosi there, and all the viewers in the country. I think on behalf of the Congress of Traditional Leaders, our President, Kosi Mutupa, Mwelo, and the entire National Executive Committee, we want to thank you for this opportunity and also to convey upfront our sincere condolences to all the families that have lost the boys who were undergoing initiation from boyhood to manhood in terms of our custom, particularly in the Eastern Cape where I come from. And I've heard my leaders who have spoken before me, and I share what they have said. It is really, certainly, it's a concern to everyone, because as we all know, the custom of initiation of boys to manhood can never beget any injury, let alone death. Clearly, the issue of death of this initiation, of these initiates, clearly tells us something. As far as the Eastern Cape is concerned, as far as 1996, and fortunately, the Deputy Minister was still a member of the Provincial House, myself, and Minister. We then established our commission of our own to investigate what is the cause of this. And the report was there. And what is contained in various legislation is, in fact, is a product of that report. But critical to that report was that this custom must be administered where it must be administered, by traditional institutions. That's where we don't find each other with our government, unfortunately. Because after we presented that, the government therefore decided to intervene, because they had the right to intervene, because there was this pandemic as far as we are concerned, and gave power to MEC for Health then, whether initiated or not. And now there is the act in the Eastern Cape go back to where it should be administered by traditional institutions themselves. And hence the House of Traditional Leaders was given a power to really coordinate this initiation together, of course, with key department in the province. Not only at the provincial level, there were structures up to the bottom, the initiation working committee that were there.
Right.
And of course, that was the Eastern Cape Act, but now there's an Act of Parliament. Act of Parliament came with another new regime, but we may talk about it later on, New York and PICC. Now, the minister of COGTA is now in charge of initiation, and now the premiers in the province, which means it's drifting backwards, this thing. And this is frustrating us, because Section 20 of the Act clearly states our responsibility as traditional leaders, which is correct, to make sure then that in our areas of jurisdiction, and this custom is actually administered properly in accordance with our culture, as well as in accordance with the laws of the Republic of South Africa.
Let's put it to Deputy Minister, in terms of government's role. Is there a fine line between interfering, so to speak, in customary practices and also regulating these schools, circumcision schools, initiation schools?
Well, I would imagine that the role of government is a consequence, or is consequential in its nature, following an unfortunate eventuality of either a casualty or fatality. By its nature, the rite of passage wouldn't have required government to set up a regulatory framework. Had everything else been done in accordance with the cultural practices and customs, as I have said initially. Why we are where we are today is because of myths that we really need to dispel. As I said, issues of water, issues of, it's pure negligence. It's pure negligence. And I think that's the area Nonkonyana is talking about, to say, if we have a system where traditional leaders in their areas of jurisdiction are equipped adequately to ensure that, as the statutory and customary structure, they have all the necessary tools to take responsibility of everything that would happen in their areas of jurisdiction. This probably would have assisted in ensuring that there is clear intervention in instances where there's a need. Because I think the issue that is a concern from traditional leaders is that we live in a constitutional democracy where citizens have got rights. So for the institution not to be seen interfering with what others may consider to be their individual family rights, you then need an instrument with which to empower the institution. Now, our approach as government is that we have, in instances, because we're a caring government, in instances where there is threat to life, we are forced to do something which ordinarily we are not supposed to do. In this case, to regulate a custom, to regulate a cultural practice, is because of the unfortunate eventualities, amputations, deaths, other forms of injuries inflicted to young, innocent boys who would have made a better future, who would have contributed quite responsibly in the reconstruction of society. Now their life is cut short, and it's very painful, especially for women, because they look after these children up until they are 18. Then they hand them over to men. Within a period of 14 or 21 days, they die. Die in the hands of men, when their mothers have managed to look after them under difficult circumstances for 18 years. Within a period of 10 days, being in the hands of men, they die. And That then necessitated government to come up with regulatory framework to ensure that that must not continue to happen. Otherwise, we really have to work together as different organs and institutions of civil society with traditional leadership taking the leadership role, especially in areas under their jurisdiction. Because traditional leaders, remember, traditional councils are organs of state in terms of the constitution, and therefore they have a constitutional role and duty to exercise public power, public function, and public duty.
All right. We need to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about the synergy between traditional leaders, Ikosi, as well as government, and how we can better work together in order to put paid to initiates debts. That is the basic question, right? It seems to be a simple question, but it's complicated answers. Why are we still losing youngsters when they go? You heard the Deputy Minister talking about women raising their kids till 18, and then in a matter of 10 days, they die. Why? More next. Okay, welcome back. We're talking about the very serious issue of initiations, initiate deaths, as the death toll rises in some parts of South Africa. We're asking what measures should be taken or put in place to avoid this, to ensure the safest rite of passage of circumcision in schools. We have a number of guests to give their input in order to get us to that better place. We also have our digital audience as well. They joining us now live. We appreciate them. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Before I get to the digital audience, I want to just come back to you, Ikosi. And I know the Deputy Minister needed to put some glasses on because it's very bright in here. So just take that into consideration. Ikosi, Mahlangu, we were speaking of it with regards to the understanding or the need to understand the difference between initiation and circumcision. Me looking from outside in, what do I need to understand in terms of the fundamental difference of this?
Blaine, the difference of circumcision and initiation is that circumcision, it's medical, which is done by doctors. But initiation, it's something that you get from the culture when you are initiated. So it is very much different because people tend to go for circumcision. And then when the time comes for them to go to initiation, they said, no, I'm circumcised. I don't know. Because where's our culture there? There's a difference between circumcision and initiation.
All right. It's important to note these distinctions, especially when somebody's not a part of the culture and kind of trying to understand and to get to that better place that we keep on talking about. Thank you, Ikosi, for that. Let's bring in our digital audience and get their take. Professor Ngobane, a cultural expert, I hope you've been listening to the conversation. Where do you see the problem? Where can we get it right? Where are the quick fixes?
Thank you very much for inviting me. I think I've been listening to the comments made by the previous speakers, and I think what we need to emphasize is that this rite of passage is sacred, and it combines both cultural and also traditional and religious. So it's part of a prayer because you are bringing a young man to become an adult. So I'm very much impressed by the previous speaker's definition and distinction of circumcision, which is correctly different from initiation, because when you initiate, it means you are introducing a young man to manhood. And it comes along with teaching culture, how to respect women, and also how to become responsible in a society or in a community. So this is not about the act or the practice itself, but it brings in education as well. So that is why it is very important that we have this kind of dialogue. I think what I can say is that we need to have monitors of these processes, because we know that we have people who practice without any legality. So we need to avoid abuse of the practice, because there are people who just fly by night schools and start abusing this process. I think the solution is that the traditional leadership should become champions of the practice, and then there need to be a committee or a group of experts that will monitor the processes when this practice is taking place. I think working together is core within the department, the COGTA and the Traditional Affairs Department. I think that is the only solution. Just to go around and check whether these schools are legal, and also to see how this process is performed. And I think that is a process. It's not something that can happen overnight, but it must have a proper plan of how these monitors can be appointed. Because the other thing that I can say is that people who implement this customary initiation are somehow trained, but I don't think all of them are trained. So I think the training is also very important, to train the initiators so that they do a proper job. And also someone has mentioned that the tools that are used must be checked for hygiene, because sometimes young boys die because of some previous infections that they have. I think that's where the health practitioners have to come in to check the health fitness of the young men before they go to the school, because sometimes the cause of death is caused by a prior sickness within the boy, and then this adds to that.
Okay. Prof, thank you very much for your take. Let's get Thando Mahlangu. Where do you see the issue? The good professor was talking about monitoring, and I guess as always, or in South Africa, the policy is there, the measures are there, but it's implementation, right? Where do you see the quick fixes here, Thando?
Lochan Bagwetu. I think in South Africa, our traditional leaders, they need to lead the whole thing. And we have to eliminate the alcohol use. And then another thing that we need to eliminate, or we need to have a workshop. Just like yesterday, Aboma, they had their workshop at Sheldon, where they talk about their culture, their tradition, their language, because now tradition and culture and the language, they go better together. So now, we need to have our own workshop. That's where we can have this discussion, so that we can safeguard each other, you know. Because now, if you can look at the incidents that they are coming out now, they always, or most of them, they are happening in Eastern Cape. We don't know what's the challenge or what's the cause. And if the government can get involved, where else they get people who went through the same passage, people who went to these schools, you know, because now the challenge that we have is that the people in government, they never done this tradition, so they don't understand them. So they don't understand the challenges and everything that we're facing. But another thing that I've seen is that young people, they are smoking a lot of things. Now they have nyaupes, because now when you go to that school, you are no longer going to get that supply of the nyaupe. That's the problem. The drugs that we are using as young people, it's contributing in this whole thing. And the negligence of the alcohol use, it's also contributing, because most of the time, all these things, they are coming from Eastern Cape. Let's look at Amandebele, what they have done. I believe, Guti, the Xhosa-speaking people, they can learn a lot from the way Amandebele, they are handling the whole thing.
Thank you very much indeed, Tando. Let's go to Sidwell. Where do you see the issue, Sidwell? Is it illegal schools? Is it the issues of drugs and alcohol? Where's the quick fixes? If you can unmute, Sidwell. There we go. Let's try that again. Okay, we're having a bit of an issue with Sidwell's. I want to take Lunika. Luyanda, you've heard the conversation. A number of issues have been raised in terms of where we can get it right. Where do you see the main issues in terms of possibly the synergy between government and communities working together to get to that solution? If you can unmute, give us your take, Luyanda.
Thanks, and good evening to the listeners. We're coming live from Taba's location in Montreal, where we celebrated the return.
Is it just me? Luyanda, I think we're having a bit of an issue with your audio. Let's try to fix it up. Mhle will try to get you off air and try to fix it up. We'll try to bring you back before the show finishes. I want to bring in Anga Ntsepe. Anga is an actor. From the critically acclaimed isiXhosa film Inxeba, The Wound, tackles tradition, sexuality, masculinity. Anga, where do you see the problem and where are the solutions here? Because we can't go on with people, our youngsters, our children dying.
Greetings to everyone. I think the problem is that government and culture is not fusing and merging together and creating one. So if government can open resources for the culture and help them be able to access things such as healthcare, such as healthy medicine for the people, so that the people, if they are sick, if there are any problems, that they are able to get medicated, they are able to get help. You know, and I think the quick fixes are that before initiates do go to initiation school, they are checked out, and that the use of medical doctors is used in initiation school. Not to say that the people who do help in initiation schools should be eliminated from the equation. Just that they should help each other, you know, in order to get a positive equilibrium. Thank you.
Right, Anga, thank you very much indeed. Professor, maybe I'll bring you in with regards to the synergy between government as well as communities, as well as traditional leaders, other structures that you were speaking about. Where can it improve? Anga was speaking about more resources. I'll get to the Deputy Minister in a bit in terms of how we can improve that. But do you see that as a major stumbling block in terms of opening up more resources?
Well, the resource is an important ingredient in the entire system. But my view is that accountability is a key across the system, because there are individual structures or individual stakeholders responsible in making sure that there is success in the initiation schools.
Right.
If you eliminate all the challenges with regard to alcohol, whatever happens there, and make sure that the issues of health are provided, and this value chain. For example, the municipality must provide water, it must provide land, and the law enforcement agencies look at criminality, negligence, and all of that. Those are cross-sectional activities. Once that happens, they will be able to deliver young people who go to the initiation school alive and come back alive, which is the motto which each and every community must adopt. Going to the initiation school alive and come back alive. And I see that there's a working relationship in that regard.
What about the criminality, Deputy Minister? You heard about the issue of encouraging more resources or opening up more resources. But are these cases going to court, these illegal schools that are found to be operating? How much has come to, I'm not sure if you know the figures, but how much has come to judicial closure?
Well, part of the reasons why Parliament had to enact this legislation, which is the customary Initiation Act, was to address those legal lacuna, because there were gaps which would have weakened the cases at the level of the prosecution, as well as when the either magistrates or judges have to hand down judgments. Because remember, these are criminal cases, and they are evidence based. So that in the course of dealing with the case, you must make sure that there is every evidence that will lead to conviction. So and again, you also had to make sure that you empower the police in the formulation of the charges and the whole judicial value chain that will lead to the conviction. Hence, this legislation that has now, among other things, placed the responsibility of oversight to the National Initiation Oversight Committee at the level of at national level. Then you would have your provincial initiation coordinating committee. By its nature, it's coordinating because it has to coordinate different sectors, institutions and organs to work together. Because the principle is that, as Prof has correctly put it, we have to work together to make sure that all these unfortunate eventualities are curtailed. And of course, this practice is practiced in different areas. There are also urban areas and rural areas. Now, there are different governance structures. With rural areas, you've got traditional leaders who are able to take charge of the areas under their jurisdiction. Now, in urban areas, you have councillors and all of that. And in some areas, you've got ward councillors who may not be considered to be eligible. Perhaps, if I may correct a part of what was the assumptions that were placed by Utando Mahlangu. When you say people in government have not undergone, it's a very wide assumption. I'm here, I'm a deputy minister. I've gone through it. I've taken a number of people in my community and family. So it's a very misplaced assumption. And we are very strict as government to say those who are involved, especially at the government level, we must make sure that it's people who understand, who know, who have undergone, because we understand the sensitivities that would be inherent in the course of dealing with oversight and all of that.
Deputy Minister, I wish we had more time. It's never enough to speak on these issues. I thank you so much, all of you, for coming. Ikosi, Deputy Minister, as well as Professor, also Inkosi, Mwelo, and all our guests. I'm so sorry that we couldn't get to Luyanda as well as Sidwell due to technical issues. But no doubt it needs to be an ongoing conversation. And it doesn't have to be a conversation only now, during when these initiation seasons kicks off. It needs to be a year long to get to that better place, but we appreciate you. Thank you so much. All right, before we go, here's my take. When discussing this topic, someone said to me, for them, initiation deaths are no longer shocking. They are like road fatality stats over the holidays. It's something we expect every season. Now, sadly, this seemingly callous statement is how many feel. But I feel that we have to resist the urge of becoming numb to sorrow, right? We need to put purpose to pain. You want your child to go through this respected journey, but how do I, as a parent, know for sure that no harm will come to my child? That question hangs heavy on the minds of many communities. Does the answer lie in stricter regulations and monitoring to weed out illegal institutions? Or can the solutions be found within communities, relevant stakeholders working together, looking out for one another? Perhaps a combination of both. As I said at the beginning of this program, it's important as a South African to understand each other's culture and heritage, better appreciate, right, what makes us unique as a nation, so that we can all contribute to the betterment of society. The safety of our children should be a societal responsibility, no doubt, which means love and action through community interaction. And that's my take. If you missed anything, be sure to watch this episode of It's Topical on YouTube. Sports Live up next. And if you're watching a repeat of this program, then as always, the news continues. Until next week, my brothers and sisters, take care. Bye-bye.